The alien council chamber was filled with the hum of quiet murmurs as representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species exchanged sharp glances. Their leader, a tall being covered in silver plating and adorned with intricate alien sigils, gazed down from his throne with quiet disdain. He knew the importance of this meeting, yet his mind was focused on more pressing matters. His people, the towering Zarthians, had long since outgrown the need for diplomacy. Everything about the human race seemed laughable beneath them. The human envoy, standing alone in the center of the room, was the only one who seemed unaffected by the weight of the moment. He was just a man, unremarkable in appearance, dressed in simple, worn clothing. But his eyes carried a weight that made the council uneasy, though none of them would admit it aloud. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, but with an undertone of something far darker. "We request your attention," the human said, his voice reverberating across the chamber. "There has been a misunderstanding." The council leader leaned forward, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. He could not understand why such a simple race continued to send emissaries. The humans had proven time and again that their technology was far behind theirs, their culture too fragmented to pose any threat. He had already decided this meeting was a waste of time. What could a species that barely knew interstellar travel offer in negotiations? Nothing. "We've listened to enough." "Of your kind," the leader scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your wars, your petty disputes, your primitive technology, you have no place among us. Return to your pathetic little world, and we will forget this ever happened." A ripple of laughter passed through the council. The human envoy remained still, his expression unwavering. "We are not here to negotiate," the human diplomat continued. "This is a warning." A low chuckle echoed around the room. The Zarthian leader's smile grew wider, his sharp teeth gleaming. "A warning," he said mockingly. "From you? You have nothing to threaten us with." The envoy didn't respond. He simply stepped back slightly, as if to signal the end of the conversation. For a moment it seemed as though he was done. But then, as if on cue, the room fell into an eerie silence. The council members, still chuckling among themselves, barely noticed the subtle change in the atmosphere. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that seemed unnatural. The human diplomat turned slowly, his face still unreadable. He gave a slight nod. The silence that followed was punctuated by a strange humming noise, faint but growing louder. The floor vibrated ever so slightly, like the distant rumble of thunder. The laughter in the council chamber stopped abruptly, the sudden quiet like the calm before a storm. And then the first screen flickered. The image on the screen was a simple, almost primitive one at first glance. A ship appeared, its silhouette dark against the stars. The human ship. The council leader squinted, leaning forward in his seat, trying to make sense of the display. The vessel was massive, far larger than anything the council had anticipated. But there was something else about it. The ship's design was archaic, crude in comparison to the sleek, powerful vessels of the council. Its hull was jagged, raw, and unsettling. It looked as though it had been crafted by hands that had no concept of refinement, no understanding of the elegance that the council held so dear. It was a brutal, unpolished thing. Yet, as it appeared on the screen, something about it resonated. "Is this some kind of joke?" the council leader asked, his voice tight with irritation. This is their warning." The human envoy's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "No," he said softly. "This is." Before the leader could respond, a wave of motion caught the council's attention. The screen shifted, zooming out to reveal a fleet. No, an armada of ships. Hundreds, if not thousands, of similar vessels appeared behind the first, surrounding it in a dense formation. The sheer size of the fleet was staggering, and the air around the council leader seemed to freeze. This is impossible," the leader whispered under his breath, as panic flickered across his face. But it was far too late. The human fleet ignited. The engines flared to life with a ferocity that sent ripples through the atmosphere of the council chamber. A deep, resonant hum shook the very foundations of the room. The alien representatives rose from their seats in shock, their hands instinctively reaching for the controls at their sides, their fingers trembling. The first ship launched forward, breaking the silence with the deafening sound of its engines. But it was no ordinary propulsion. No, it wasn't some sleek, efficient design of the Zarthians or their allies. The human ships were powered by something far more brutal, more raw, something primitive, something old, a force that demanded attention not by grace, but by sheer, unrelenting power. The shockwave hit them. It was not just an explosion, it was a force of nature. The ship's engines fired a blast of pure kinetic energy, aimed directly at the nearest moon in the Council system. The explosion was catastrophic, a chain reaction of destruction, the kind that shattered planets and tore apart entire solar systems, lit up the sky. The screen flickered, showing the moon's destruction in real time. It was instant, silent. The fragments of the moon scattered across space, a cold, silent reminder of what the humans were capable of. The council members stared in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The diplomat didn't need to say anything more. The message had been delivered in full force. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They thought it was mercy, the human envoy's voice echoed in the silence. It wasn't. The room was still, too still. The council members, once full of arrogance and pride, were now gripped by something they hadn't felt in centuries. Fear, real fear. The kind that curled in your stomach and gnawed at the edges of your mind. And then, without a single word, the envoy turned and walked toward the exit. The doors opened with a soft hiss, and the room was filled with the sound of his footsteps. Fading away into the distance, the council leader remained frozen in his seat, staring at the screen in disbelief. He could feel the weight of the human message pressing against him, each passing second adding more to the crushing reality that had just unfolded before them. This was no joke, no petty warning. Earth had just declared itself a force to be reckoned with, and now the galaxy would learn to fear humanity. As the last of the human diplomats' footsteps echoed in the chamber, the leader finally broke the silence. "They've just started." The silence in the council chamber stretched on, suffocating in its weight. The hum of the ship's engines faded into the background, but the ripple it left in the fabric of the room remained. The screen that had shown the destruction of the moon flickered, then went black. For a moment, the entire council was lost in its own thoughts, none of them knowing what to say, what to do. The reality of the moment had slammed into them with the force of a dying star. They had never seen anything like it. The Zarthian leader, his silver skin reflecting the dim lighting of the chamber, was the first to break the silence. He straightened in his chair, his voice low but commanding. "This is impossible. No race in the galaxy has the capability to launch such a weapon. They are too primitive." A ripple of murmurs passed through the council members. They were struggling to reconcile what they had just witnessed with their knowledge of humanity. It was a paradox. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragmented, and barely capable of surviving their own planet, let alone reaching the stars. But the destruction they had just unleashed, it was a statement, one that not only defied their expectations, but shattered them completely. A Gorthian, a species known for its cold, calculating nature, finally spoke, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Perhaps they have some new technology we are unaware of. The ships, they are crude, but the energy they released, It's unlike anything we've encountered. The council leader shook his head, his gaze still fixed on the now blackened screen. That's what makes it so dangerous. The humans are not using advanced technology. They're using something much older, something that we cannot predict. A voice from the back of the chamber cut through the rising panic. And the moon! They destroyed it without hesitation. If this is their way of negotiating, then we've gravely misjudged them. Perhaps they don't even understand what they've done, another member muttered, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. Maybe this was just a warning, as they said. A long pause followed, but it wasn't a moment of clarity. It was a moment of dread. They all knew that humans didn't do things for no reason. There was always a purpose behind their actions, a hidden agenda that made them even more unpredictable. The destruction wasn't an accident. It was a signal, a declaration. They must be planning something, the Zarthian leader said, his voice rising with a mixture of fear and rage. We have to respond. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown across a battlefield. The council leader stood slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. A response. Yes, we will show them that their strength means nothing in the face of the Galactic Order. We will remind them who truly holds power. But even as he spoke, a nagging thought pressed at the edges of his mind. What if they were wrong? What if humanity was more than they had assumed? The Zarthians were a race of conquerors. They had taken over entire systems, wiped out civilizations, and installed their own order wherever they went. Yet, for the first time, the idea of losing control was terrifying. Another member, a stoic and pragmatic Zycorian, interrupted the growing tension. Before we move forward, we must gather more information. We cannot act on impulse. If they've truly developed such destructive capabilities, we may be dealing with something beyond our understanding. We must analyze this further before making a decision. The council leader scowled, but he knew the Zycorian was right. As much as he hated the thought of allowing humans more time to prepare, they had no choice but to learn more. If Earth's message was indeed a declaration of war, then they had to be ready for what was coming. They couldn't risk underestimating their enemy again. What do you suggest? The leader asked, his voice tight. The Zycorian's eyes flickered with a cold calculation. We send reconnaissance ships to Earth, not just to observe, but to gather data on their technology, their weapons, their strategic capabilities. We need to know exactly what we're up against. Another council member, a Vaxian, stood up and shook his head. What if they detect our ships? What if they know we're watching them? Then we'll make sure they don't, the Zycorian replied, a hint of a smirk on his face. We've mastered stealth technology. They won't know a thing. The leader's eyes narrowed. Very well. We'll proceed with this plan, but we must move swiftly. If we wait too long, the humans might gain an upper hand. As the council debated their next move, a cold, calculated plan was being set in motion. But even as the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful factions made their preparations, a more disturbing thought lingered in the air. What if the humans were just getting started? Meanwhile, on Earth, the human diplomat who had delivered the warning was walking down a long, dimly lit corridor within a secret military facility. His footsteps echoed softly against the cold metal floor, a sharp contrast to the rumbling chaos of the council chamber just moments before. He had delivered his message, and now his part was done. But even as he passed through the facility's secure doors and into the control room, a part of him felt uneasy. The destruction of the moon had been the first step, a warning. But what came next? The facility was abuzz with activity. Officers and technicians moved with purpose, monitoring the communications from the Galactic Council and analyzing the responses. The human envoy paused at the entrance of the room and looked at the large screen before him. "We've done it," a voice behind him said. The speaker was a military commander, his tone one of satisfaction. "The fleet is ready. We've made our presence known," The diplomat nodded, though his mind was far from satisfied. And now? Now we wait. The silence in the room grew as the commander looked up at the screen. For the first time in a long time, there was no arrogance in the diplomat's eyes, no false bravado. Instead, there was something far more dangerous, something the Council had failed to see in their mockery of humanity. Quiet, determined resolve. We wait, the diplomat echoed, and when they come, we'll be ready. And so, while the Council on the other side of the galaxy prepared its response, Earth was already positioning itself. It wasn't just a fleet that humanity had unleashed. It was a message, and the galaxy had yet to understand the full scope of that message. Humanity wasn't coming to negotiate. Humanity was coming to dominate. The hum of the council chamber had returned, but this time it was different. The chatter was more intense, frantic. Each representative of the various species murmured amongst themselves, trying to make sense of the impossible. The high-ranking members of the council, who had once dismissed the human race as irrelevant, were now consumed with a growing sense of dread. They had received the warning, felt the impact, and now they realized something they had overlooked. They were no longer the apex of the galaxy. The humans had made their presence known, and they had done so with a message that carried weight, destruction, and a chilling promise. The Zarthian leader stood at the head of the room, his expression hard and unreadable, but his eyes betrayed his concern. He had never anticipated this turn of events. The humans had destroyed a moon. No, they had obliterated it with ease. And for what? A simple declaration? Or had they shown a glimpse of something more? Something far more dangerous than the galaxy had ever seen? How do we move forward? The Zykorian representative asked, his voice steady, but there was a tremor beneath it. Even the coldest minds could not mask the fear. If they have such power, how can we fight back? Fight back? The Zarthian leader scoffed, his arrogance clinging to his words. We are the Galactic Council. We have stood unchallenged for eons. If we stand together, no primitive race can threaten us. But his voice lacked conviction. The Zykorian's question hung in the air, unanswered, and the silence that followed was deafening. They all knew the truth. They were no longer the top predators. In the galaxy, the humans had proven that in a single moment, with one devastating strike. We must act quickly, the Zarthian leader continued, his voice now tinged with uncertainty. Prepare the fleets. We will invade Earth and wipe them out before they have the chance to organize. This can't be allowed to stand. An invasion. The voice came from the Vaxian, a being with silver skin and insect-like features. Are you certain we should go that far? What if they have more weapons we don't know about? What if we underestimate them again? The council leader's gaze snapped to the Vaxian, a flash of irritation crossing his face. We will not underestimate them, he snapped. We will send everything we have. The humans need to be shown that they cannot challenge the power of the Galactic Council. Despite the leader's bravado, a deeper unease simmered beneath the surface. The Zarthians were powerful, but they had never faced a race like humanity before. The way the human fleet had appeared, the raw power they unleashed, it was unlike anything they had ever seen. As the council members discussed their next move, the diplomat who had delivered Earth's warning sat in a quiet room, alone. The hum of the base around him felt distant, almost surreal. He had done what he was sent to do, deliver the message. And now, the waiting began. He wasn't afraid. There was no fear in his eyes. He had known this moment would come. The humans had always been underestimated. They had always been seen as weak, unworthy. But deep inside, humanity had always known their potential. The diplomat's mind lingered on the events that had led to this moment, the long years of building, of waiting, of preparing. The time for silence was over. Do you think they'll retaliate? A voice broke his thoughts. It was the commander, walking into the room. With a purposeful stride, retaliate, the diplomat echoed. Of course they will. The council thinks they can crush us under their heel, but they don't understand. They think we're primitive, that we don't have the will to fight. They're wrong. The commander's eyes narrowed. You think they'll come for us directly? All of them? The entire council? Yes, the diplomat said, his voice cold. But it won't be enough. They'll come, they'll try to crush us, but they'll fail. And when they do, they'll realize their mistake. That's the key. They'll learn what happens when they underestimate humanity. The commander looked at him, a mixture of curiosity and admiration in his eyes. You're confident? The diplomat's lips curled into a faint smile. Not confident, just certain. They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. As he spoke, the screens in the command room flickered to life. The fleet's status updates began to roll in, each one confirming what he already knew. Earth wasn't just ready for war. They had been preparing for this moment for years. It wasn't just technology that made the humans a threat. It was their relentless determination, their refusal to back down. They had nothing to lose, and that made them more dangerous than the Council could ever imagine. And so, as the Zarthians began to prepare their fleets for an invasion, Earth's message had been delivered. The battle lines were drawn. The galaxy was on the edge of something it had never faced before, a war with humanity. The humans would not beg for mercy. They would not surrender. The Council would learn too late that the greatest mistake they ever made was thinking Earth was a weak target. The greatest mistake they made was thinking humanity could be ignored. The fleet moved through space with calculated precision, their destination set, their mission clear. The Galactic Council had made its choice, and Earth was about to pay the price for underestimating humanity. The invasion force, massive, unyielding, was ready to descend upon the planet, a show of overwhelming force meant to crush any resistance. Before it could even begin, but as the Zarthian fleet neared Earth, something unexpected happened. The atmosphere surrounding the planet grew heavy, electric, as if charged with an unseen power. The Council's ships slowed as their sensors scrambled to adjust, their technology failing to account for what they were seeing. Suddenly, the calm of space was broken. From the depths of Earth's orbit, massive ancient warships, hidden for centuries, emerged. Their designs were nothing like the sleek, advanced ships of the Council. These ships were relics, brutal and raw in their construction. They had been lying in wait, buried beneath the surface of the planet, their weapons dormant, waiting for the right moment. And now, that moment had arrived. The Zarthians had underestimated humanity, but they had also underestimated Earth itself. The fleet opened fire, but the ancient warships were ready. The first shots fired by the Zarthians struck the human vessels and ricocheted harmlessly off their thick, reinforced hulls. It was clear that the human ships were not just relics, they were stronger, far more resilient than anything the Council could have imagined. Within moments, the human warships retaliated. Massive beams of energy, ranging from brute kinetic force to disintegrating pulses of pure energy, tore through the Zarthian lines. Their ships began to break apart, the once unified force dissolving in a chaotic burst of explosions. Panic spread like wildfire through the ranks of the invaders. The galaxy's most feared empire was being torn apart by a race they had deemed insignificant. Back on Earth, the diplomat watched as the images of the battle filled the screen. There was no gloating in his eyes, only a grim satisfaction. This wasn't just about victory, it was about a message. The galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. As the last of the Zarthian fleet was obliterated, a single transmission came through from Earth's command center. The Galactic Council is no more. Earth remains, and the galaxy would never forget the day humanity showed its true power.